Today, we're jumping into a really thought-provoking sermon by a prominent Brazilian priest, Padre Chrystian Shankar. He lays out this idea that the modern family is facing a kind of spiritual battle. We're going to break down his arguments, what he sees as the main challenges, and the solutions he offers. It's a fascinating look at a very modern problem through a spiritual lens.
And this quote, this is basically the key to his entire sermon. It really sets the tone, right? The focus isn't on some huge, overwhelming force from the outside. Instead, it's all about personal responsibility, about those small, overlooked vulnerabilities in our own lives that can let bigger problems in.
So here's how we're going to walk through his ideas. We'll start with how he defines the problem, then look at the specific strategies he talks about. After that, we'll get into his core metaphor of the little foxes, and then dive into his very practical solutions before we wrap it all up with this final call to action.
Okay, so first up is the core premise. Padre Shankar's argument starts with the idea that the family is the fundamental building block of everything, of society, of the church. And because it's so important, he believes it's become the main target in a spiritual fight. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. He claims that this isn't some secret hidden attack anymore. The big shift he identifies is that these challenges to the family are now out in the open. He sees them promoted everywhere, in TV shows, in pop music, even in schools, making them a constant, unavoidable part of daily life.
So, if the family is on a spiritual battleground, what does the attack plan look like? Well, Padre Shankar actually lays out what he calls the enemy's playbook, a set of specific tactics he believes are being used to deliberately weaken the family from the inside out.
And here they are, 7 of them. You can see they cover a lot of ground, right? You got internal issues, things like division in the home and communication just completely breaking down. And then there are these external pressures, like questioning core values or things that pull kids away from their faith. This list really gives us a clear map of the problems he's about to tackle.
Now, to explain how all this happens, Padre Shankar brings in a central metaphor. And honestly, if you get this, you get his whole perspective. It's this concept of the little foxes.
This is the biblical verse that it all comes from. The idea is that the vineyard, which represents the family, is in bloom, full of life and potential. But the biggest threat isn't some giant beast. No, it's something way smaller, way more sneaky. So, what are these little foxes? They're the small things, the tiny compromises we make, the little arguments that we never quite resolve, the bad habits we let slide. He argues that on their own, they seem like no big deal, but when they add up, that's what really causes the damage. Basically, the biggest dangers to the family often come in the smallest, most innocent-looking packages. Okay, so after laying out that pretty serious diagnosis, the sermon shifts gears and starts talking about real, concrete solutions. And the very first thing he addresses is how to fight back against that division and silence that's creeping into so many homes.
This contrast here just says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you have the problem we all recognize, a family living under the same roof, but everyone's in their own little world, glued to a screen, talking to people miles away, but ignoring the person sitting right next to them. And his solution? It's so simple it's almost radical. Just set aside one night a week as family night. No big agenda. Just be together, talk, reconnect. And for families that have kind of drifted away from faith, he offers this really practical, low-pressure guide to bringing it back. He says, look, don't try to force a big prayer session out of nowhere. Start where people naturally come together, around food. Share pizza, say a quick, simple prayer of thanks, and then maybe, just maybe, suggest a really short prayer together. The key here is patience, not pressure.
So, building on that theme of taking active steps, the next big solution he offers is about parents really stepping up and reclaiming their role as leaders and teachers in the home, not just as friends.
He uses this really vivid term for what he sees as a growing problem, the syndrome of the emperor. And what he means by that is a home where the kids are basically running the show. Their wants, their demands, their schedules dictate everything, because the parents have, in his view, given up their authority to teach and to set boundaries.
And that leads to his core message for parents, which is pretty direct. He says, of course you can be your child's friend, that's a great thing, but you have to be their parent first. He insists that a parent's #1 job is to educate, to guide, to form character, even when it's tough and unpopular.
All right, so as we start to pull all these threads together, you can see that everything, the problems, the strategies, the solutions, it all builds to one central idea, a call for families to be spiritually aware and to actively defend themselves. So what are the big takeaways here? If you boil the sermon down, it comes to these 5 action points. First, just acknowledge that there's a struggle going on. Second, be a fox hunter. Actively look for those small compromises in your home. Third, put the marriage relationship first because that's the foundation. Fourth, fully own your role as a parent and guide. And finally, pay close attention to what the culture is teaching your kids.
And that really leaves us with the final, big question to chew on. Padre Shankar offers this deeply spiritual framework for problems that, let's be honest, a lot of families, religious or not, can relate to. Feeling disconnected, losing authority, dealing with outside pressures. So it makes you think, no matter what you believe, what can we take away from this idea of vigilance when it comes to keeping our own families strong and united today?